My name is Katherine Beim-Esche, and I'm the founder and director of the Fellowship of Former Christian Scientists. And this webinar is part of the Get Wise project that addresses the psychological damage that comes from years of indoctrination from Christian Science. And part of the Get Wise project is that we collaborate with the ex-Christian Scientist group, and we're just really glad to be walking together in this journey of recovery. And so we're really thankful to have Heidi here today, helping from the ex-Christian Scientist group as moderating the Q&A and helping behind the scenes here. So thanks so much for being here. We're also really just so thrilled to have Bob and Judy Pardon here leading our teaching today. They are experts in cult recovery and for over 30 years have been helping people leave and recover from destructive groups. And now for almost 3 years, they've been helping walk alongside us, people with a background in Christian Science. And just like a kind of like a doctor with an expertise, they've been helping us diagnose how Christian Science has really been destructive in our worldview and just the psychological damage that comes from that, and kind of like doctors helping diagnose and then create a care plan. And they've been helping to create resources and tools for recovery with our conferences and helping with our support groups and in these webinars. So it's just a real honor to have them caring for us and helping us in this way. They're dear friends and just really amazing people. So that is just really a great thing for us. I'm really thankful. So today we're going to be talking about identity, and that's just a huge thing for us as former Christian Scientists. In Christian Science, we were taught that personality was bad. It was a negative thing. Something to be kind of denied. We were taught that we had to be perfect. And I don't even quite know what that means almost. What did that mean to be perfect? I do know that I felt a lot of guilt and shame if I wasn't perfect, though, or whatever that meant. If I was sick, or maybe I was feeling moody, or someone was mad at me. I know that I would feel a lot of guilt and shame about that, and that lingered even after I left Christian Science. I found that I was setting up a good enough life, and then one day I woke up. I realized I was living someone else's life. I really didn't know much about myself and how I was wired. And that kind of started me down a road of discovery as I started doing counseling and starting to learn about taking up space and being curious about what I was feeling. I realized that in Christian Science, we denied and repressed our identity, our personality so much that I didn't know how I was wired, that I was a physical person that had limits and needs and emotions, and I processed things in a certain way, and I had skills that could be cultivated and enjoyed and celebrated in others, that we all have gifts and are made in different ways, and just how wonderful that was. So, there's a lot to untangle as former Christian Scientists. And, as Bob and Judy Pardon say, you can't change what you don't understand. And so we have to take steps to freedom. And this is kind of an exciting thing that we're doing here today. And so you all are really brave and courageous to be taking this step and learning more. And I'm just excited about walking together in this journey of recovery, breaking free from the bondage of Christian Science. And we're just really happy to have Bob and Judy here and thankful for what they're going to share with us today. So Bob and Judy, let's have you start sharing. There we are. Bob and Judy, we're so glad to have you here.
Good to be here.
Yes, very much is good to be here with you folk. So we've had the opportunity and privilege, as Katie said, of being involved in a number of these contexts, and we are looking forward to being able to do this more and more as the future goes on. So today what we really want to go into is, why is Christian Science still influencing my identity? And in many respects, this is like a part two of a webinar that we did last year that was Why is Christian Science Still Influencing My Life? So it's kind of building upon that for those of you who were at that one. So leaving Christian Science is something that is far different than leaving, at least from our experience, most other kinds of cults that we've worked with over 30 years. So we want to tell you a little bit about who we are, for those of you who don't know. I'm an ordained minister. Judy is an educator and has advanced degrees in counseling, and we're both committed Christians. We have operated for 30 years the New England Institute of Religious Research and then Meadowhaven, which is the only long-term transitional facility in the world for people that come out of destructive groups. We have done a number of different things. Interventions, which is where you get somebody out of a group, dealt with legal issues, support groups, just giving information, working with the media, teaching, just a lot of different things along those lines. And we had the privilege of over 14 years of 20 years actually of working with a number of different what we call second generation or multi-generation individuals that have come out of groups. So they weren't recruited, they were born and raised in the group. And these are just some of them that you can see there. Now, being committed Christians, one of the things that Judy and I have always said with anyone that came to Meadowhaven is we're not here to tell you what to believe. That's your journey. But we do believe that there are certain things that you can do that will help your own recovery. That is very, very important. And we'll talk more about this when we get down towards the end of our presentation today. So these are some of the things that other, what we call multi-generational individuals have taught us about recovery in life. One, there's very little literature out there that you can read that talks about how to recover for what we would call second generation or multi-generational. So you folk are really kind of a unique subset in that respect. But this is not something that you want to be unique on or special in this kind of way. Generally, we have found that individuals who have been born and raised in group only try to find help when they're in a crisis. It's like having an orphan disease. No one understands. No one is prepared to help. Nowhere to send you to get help many, many times. So you go in and you talk to a therapist about the issues you're struggling with, and they either don't consider Christian Science at all, or they just say, well, it really has nothing to do with that. Yes, that's part of it, but you need to deal with how you were treated when you were little and you were growing up and things of that sort. And those are all true, but it doesn't really help immensely. So many just end up giving up. So we start with this statement. You can't change what's going on around you until you start changing what's going on within you. Very, very important. So these are 4 critical considerations that we have emphasized over and over and over again. Some of you recognize them, but for those of you who are new, these are really critical from our perspective. First one is that there's nothing wrong with you. Something was done to you. Very important, because that separates you from your problems, your struggles. Secondly, you can't change what you don't understand. If you don't understand what's happening to you or why it is, then there's nothing you can really do about it. Thirdly, you can't change what you don't own. And then last of all, as a man thinks, so he is.
Sounds like Christian Science.
Yeah, which to a certain extent sounds like Christian Science. But having said that, it is a critical factor, and we'll get into that a little bit here in just a few moments. So we will give you a framework to reframe your experience, to be able to understand what has happened. That's the part of you can't change what you don't understand. So it's like having blueprints as to how to put together what you've gone through in your life that can begin to make sense of how you are feeling and what you're doing, why you believe what you believe, why you make the decisions that you do, all of these things that can impact your recovery. If there's no honesty about yourself and your condition, then it could be no recovery.
And the honesty sometimes has to be with yourself, because in reality, especially with SGA's second generation or multi-generational members, ex-members, they are not sure how being a Christian Scientist really has affected them. They don't recognize that. And very often you can be doing well for months, a year, 2 years, you're functioning, but all of a sudden something comes up, something happens, and you're sidetracked and you don't know why. So this honesty really is important with yourself. It's okay to admit, I don't know what is going on.
And I have struggles.
That's right.
And even though I don't want to face it, I know that my problem, that I've got some real issues that I got to work through. Now, this is true for anybody. You can't change what you don't own.
That's right.
If you're a drug addict and you don't admit that you are addicted to drugs, or that you have a drug problem, then there's nothing's going to change on that. So then last of all, as a man thinks, so he is. This deals with your internal dialogue.
Exactly.
What you say to yourself. I'm a loser. I'm no good. I'm always going to be this way. Well, if that is how you are thinking, if that's your internal dialogue, then that will probably set the stage for what you're going to continue to experience. So multi-generational ex-member issues. Most of you folk, as well as from other groups who have come out of something that is really destructive, you share a common struggle in leaving that environment, your group of origin. These experiences are common across the spectrum of all destructive groups, all cults and cultic groups. However, those born and or raised in Christian Science face many unique struggles that their counterparts do not have to deal with. This is something that we've seen over the years here, and in particular the last 3 years of working with individuals who have come out of Christian Science. So this next slide is one that we just got from Katie that I think really kind of sums it up for many destructive groups. The biggest atrocity of all is to indoctrinate our children into a system that does not value their creative expression nor encourage their unique abilities. So your wings are cut.
You can't be it.
And you can't be you. So what is the problem? You've got to be able to define that. Christian Science by nature, is a trauma-producing environment. It is something that is, in some groups, all groups like this are trauma-producing environments. A lot of them, you can see it in very evident, violent ways. Christian Science is like with a velvet glove, but it does tremendous damage to grow up in that group. So the problem is really twofold. The first is in regards to you feeling disconnected across all continuums in your life. This is deep trauma. So there is problems in my relationships with others. I have disrupted relationships, poor boundaries, feel isolated, distrust other people, there's withdrawal. I am disconnected from my own self. There's a sense of shame, guilt. I'm defiled, there's something wrong with me. A sense of helplessness, confusion, a sense of utter aloneness, nobody understands. And then a loss of sustaining faith, whatever that means for you. For those who want to continue pursuing their relationship with God, it can end up being kind of a hopelessness or despair, and trying to work through a lot of really distorted images that the individual has. So it robs you of your ability to be able to trust God, to trust others, and to trust yourself. Because I'm feeling and I believe I am disconnected and I don't know what to do about it. So look at this statement here. After disconnection, there is then this second problem. Our sensory processes scan the world around us And in order to make sense out of it, the brain has to assimilate it into a model of reality. And as we grow up, we get so good at doing this, we don't even realize we are constructing this model of reality. We just all do this at this point. So not only is there the disconnection, but there is something that is problematic, particularly for coming out of Christian Science, where my ability to make sense out of reality, I begin to question. I don't know whether I can do that or not. Let me give you an example here. You want to think of this from a neurobiology perspective.
Take a look at this.
Take a look at this. Can you read it? Why don't you read it?
According to a research study at Cambridge University, it doesn't matter in what order the letters in a word are. The only important thing is that the first and last letter be in the right place. The rest can be a total mess, yeah, and you can still read it without a problem. This is because the human mind does not read every letter by itself, but the word as a whole.
Okay, so think about that. You can read this as long as the first and the last letter are in the right place there. And you can do it because our brain makes sense out of something that is messy if we look at it very carefully, but makes sense out of it so that we can read it and make sense out of that particular statement that's being made.
So the important piece is your brain it's been wired a particular way. But it has a basic function and it has a basic way of dealing with these things that is not going to go away.
And this is part of our five senses.
That's right.
What we see, what we
That's
hear,
right.
what we smell, what we taste, what we feel. So this neurobiologist goes on to say, ordinarily, construction of a model of reality is also seamless, that everything jives with everything else. But every once in a while, thanks to a number of things such as weird migraine states or exhaustion or mental disorders like schizophrenia or somebody being psychotic, the ability of the brain to make a coherent model of the world can be disrupted. And when that happens, people are apt to feel as if something odd is going on.
There you go.
This doesn't make sense. What is real? Where does all of this lead to? How do I get out of here? So this is the added layer that Christian Science brings to coming out of a destructive thought reform group. Mary Baker, all of you are familiar with this. There's no life, truth, intelligence, nor substance in matter. All is infinite mind and its infinite manifestation. For God is all in all. Spirit is immortal truth. Matter is mortal error. Spirit is the real and eternal. Matter is the unreal and temporal. Spirit is God, and man is his image and likeness. Therefore, man is not material, he is spiritual. Incredible. So this scientific statement of being creates this very thing that we've been talking about. You create your own construct of reality that is contrary to all that you sense, all that you experience, and all the data. If you try to live in that kind of a craziness there. Again, Mary Baker Eddy, spirit is the real and eternal. Matter is the unreal and temporal. And we classify disease as error, which nothing but truth or mind can heal. So this leads us to a limerick. A CSer from Mobile said, although pain isn't real, if I sit on a pin and it punctures my skin, I dislike what I think that I feel. So what we want to do is to go into this a little bit more deeply and have you follow along in terms of not only the impact, but also what can be done here. But again, you can't change what you don't understand. So are there any questions at this point that anyone might have. And while the moderators are looking at this, this is going to be for many of you drinking through a fire hose. This is a lot of information, and it will be the first time, a lot to think about, and for many of you, the first time that you've ever heard it. We've covered this stuff in some of the support groups that we've been doing with the ex-Christian Scientists. But having said that, it still is a massive amount of material, and it should, over time, if you are persevering in trying to understand it, make sense out of your reality and cause you to understand that there really is nothing wrong with me. Something was done to me. So now remember, in thinking about the interplay of the triad of self-concept feelings, feeling a sense of your own self in a healthy way, Christian Science by nature is a trauma-producing environment, and Christian Science disconnects a person across all continuums. That's critical.
So when you're a child growing up and you're constantly being told to deny or don't pay attention to or whatever your parents told you about what your reality was, i.e. I fell down and hurt myself, or I feel sick today, I don't feel good, whatever it might be, that's trauma producing, because you're teaching the child, you're trying to train the child to deny what is real in their life at the moment. And they don't understand that. They can't understand why this is happening. And so they learn, well, you know, you all experienced it, how difficult that really is. So the trauma starts there.
Okay, so many of you have seen this before. We've used this extensively.
But well, Bob and Judy, a question just came in.
Sure.
Sorry, here we go. It says, I have a question. I've been in Christian Science for 27 years. I still have the spiritual hooks of Christian Science. I know the issues, but still can't quite pull away. I burned 3 CS books in my tomato garden this week. I had to see a doctor for BP, and yet the fear prior to being with doctors is magnified, as I was not raised in CS. How can I get over the hump without jumping into another fire?
Again, I think a big part of this is what we started with. You can't change what you don't understand. So understanding why this is happening, what's going on, if you've got a framework that can make sense out of it, that will help immensely there. So as confusing as it is, struggling for 27 years, we really feel badly for you on that. But hopefully, if this is your first time of seeing this material, some of this at least will begin to make sense for you, or at least identify that, yeah, that's it. That's what I'm struggling with, so that you can then make some decisions as to how you're going to move forward.
Well, I think that, you know, what you mentioned is that you can't get away from the spiritual piece, the spiritual, the belief system, I think is what you were saying. And that is typical of most people that leave any organization that we've ever dealt with. The spiritual piece of it keeps rolling around. So it's not abnormal that you're feeling this way. It's normal. And I think that we always say you have to dismantle the belief system in order to be able to move ahead. And I think part of that has to be a conscious effort and with someone that understands what they're doing. So maybe at the end of all of this, we can give you a few more pointers as how to do that.
Yeah. Another question came in here. Christian Science trauma seems so gentle and imperceptible. Can you say more about trauma that does not conform to the stereotypical view of trauma, like violence? Can quiet trauma cause as much damage as more overt traumatic behavior?
Yeah. In many ways, it's way worse. Primarily because when you know if somebody's beating you or somebody's abusing you in some really terrible ways, you know that that is violent and it's not right and it's not good and it's really harming you. And you can, in that context, then begin to develop a traumatic response to what you have gone through. or you're walking down the street and somebody mugs you. Those are all violent things. Christian Science is a velvet glove with an iron fist. And so it comes across as nice. It comes across as peaceful. It comes across as only emphasizing the good. When in reality, if the core of your person is being denied, if you are not able to really deal with the issues that are carried on throughout all of our lives, which is a sense of time, a sense of times of abandonment, or no one being there for us when we're really hurt. Those are all things that have a huge impact upon us in many respects, a lot worse than anything that's really violent. The old adage, sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me, is a total lie. I mean, yeah, sticks and stones will break your bones, but names do hurt you intensely. The denial of who you actually are. So, yeah, it's all complex issues, but I would contend, I think you and I would both contend that trauma doesn't have to be something where somebody is actually really beating on you and being violent in different ways. It just can happen in a very loving, caring, what appears to be a loving, caring environment.
And I think because of that perception that, the more overt trauma, everybody recognizes it. But the internal trauma, the one that is eating away at your person and causes you to deny who you really are, is much more damaging because no one sees it. And they think that you're okay. And even you think you're okay because look at me, I didn't get beaten up. My trauma isn't as bad as so-and-so's because, and I don't even know where it's coming from. But, I wasn't raped. I wasn't, run over by a car or whatever. That's obvious, as Bob said. When it's internal, it's unseen. It's very difficult to deal with because even you, the person suffering, has trouble recognizing that it's trauma.
This self-esteem triangle goes into it to a certain extent. Will help
Right.
kind of clarify some of that.
Okay.
For many of you as multi-generational survivors, you really are asked to create an identity out of whole cloth, because not only has Christian Science defined for you what you are or aren't, and who you are and who you aren't, that has been reinforced also by the environment that you grew up in, and I mean by your relationship with others there. But this sense of being a somebody, what really begins to help you to rebuild and pursue, or to build for the first time, relationships with others, yourself, and or God, this is core. So the self-esteem triangle contains three things. You've got belongingness, you've got your sense of worthiness, and you have your sense of competency. Belongingness is an awareness of being, I'm going to move to the next slide here, positions a person with respect to other people. Belongingness gives an orientation in society as one of them. One has the underlying feeling of being in or out with people. So your sense of belongingness is critical because it begins with your family of origin. It's a place where I belong. This follows us all through our lives. We join clubs. We get involved in churches. We get involved in small groups. The whole sense of being a band of brothers, individuals who have experienced certain really traumatic situations, can create a sense of belongingness because these people get it. They understand it. Sports teams, athletics, all of that is wired into our DNA. So belonging is critical to an individual's self-esteem, and it's the first part. Your sense of worthiness is built upon your sense of belongingness. Worthiness positions you as a person with respect to your own ideals and conduct, what you think is right and wrong, whether you're doing something that you think is good or bad. It gives you an orientation with respect to the appropriateness of your behavior, and other people reinforce that one way or another in regards to you. You grew up in a family, You are told that matter doesn't exist, and the pain that you're experiencing isn't really real, and you're operating under mortal mind, and that is going to create a huge problem for you because internally you're not feeling it, and it gives you an understanding then that what you're feeling is not reality, and you, by feeling that, are bad. So you're not worth the perfect person that you are intended to be within Christian Science. So this worthiness is an awareness of being either good or bad, worth something or worth nothing. Then you've got the whole issue of competency. Oops, let's go back here. Competency positions you with respect to life situations. It's not that you can, it's not that you're a great athlete or you're a great musician or you're very talented in engineering or something along those lines. It is more the I can feeling of life. It's related to how you cope with life's complexities. It orients you as a person to your circumstances, to time, to responsibility, to usefulness, to fulfillment in your role in life. So it is the sense that, yeah, I might not have all the skill set that I'd like to have to be able to face life's issues. I'm going to try, and I know I can do it. That's the kind of competency that we're talking about here. So these three feelings working together give you a sense of identity, a self-orientation to living. Belongingness, worthiness, and competence are essential elements of self-concept, and together they affirm to a person that he or she is a somebody. Now, having said this, none of us are perfect in this arena. It doesn't matter what you've grown up with. We are all on a journey. And in many respects, I heard a psychologist say one time, we are all psychoceramics. We're all crackpots. We all have the struggles. We all have times when we feel lonely, we don't belong, or we feel unworthy, worthless, or we feel incompetent. That is a given because we're broken people. But having said that, those are the core of what needs to be worked on and can be worked on that can begin to help you to discover perhaps who you are for the first time, have a foundation upon which to build. So, looking at the self-esteem triangle again, this is, again, the belongingness is an awareness of being wanted and accepted, cared for, enjoyed. It is the part of a we feeling experienced when we sense that we're wanted or desired. Worthiness is that feeling of I'm good, or I count, or I'm all right. And you see yourself as having intrinsic value just because you are. And you feel worthy when we all do, when we do as we should, which is reinforced by belonging. And we verify that sense of worthiness by others' positive attitudes towards us. And then competency is, again, that sense of adequacy, of courage, of hopefulness, of strength enough to carry out life's daily situations. This, folks, is native to every human being. It is not true because it is taught. It is true because it resonates with all of us. It simply identifies what you have always known on some level. And it defines broadly what every human being needs in order to grow and mature as an emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually healthy adult. It is the very core we find in being able to have something to build upon. So these are just some questions. We're not asking you to answer these. They're just for you to ask yourself.
So what was your understanding or your experience in CS regarding personality? Could you ever struggle with who am I? What happens when personality is defined as good or bad, real or unreal, true or false? Personality then takes on a moral connotation rather than just a definition.
Yeah, when you're looking at it as good or bad,
Yeah.
that is a moral category. So
Or even
if it,
true or false.
yeah, or even true or false, it carries those connotations. So these are the kind of things that implicitly will come up for an individual that's struggling in this whole arena of who am I, what am I?
Okay, so all of the groups that we've ever worked with have fooled around or messed with this particular aspect. They've tried to clone people. They've tried to they want your identity to look a particular way, whatever. CS gives you they don't want you to have an identity. It goes that one step further. The only identity is God's, and you have to be that perfect person.
So this is what often the choice that most ex-members have. Who am I? What am I? What do I need to put on today in order to navigate society? Or a sense of being a somebody. So we've talked about disconnection. We have talked about what happens when you don't have that sense of being a somebody, what's made up of it. But there's another aspect of Christian Science that severely disrupts any multi-generational adult from developing a stable sense of self. Another aspect. A sense of belongingness, worthiness, and competency are necessary to support a deeper understanding of your specific and unique personality, but CS provides no solid foundation to build upon. So here, the problem is that if a person grows up in a destructive group, that can fundamentally undermine their sense of who they are. That, in turn, cripples any growth as a somebody. And you then have no solid foundation to build upon. What do you build on? Is just what other people have told you.
Right.
It's just what you have found that works in this environment or that environment or whatever. But you end up feeling lost in terms of, well, who am I? What do I want? What is important to me? And even fundamental things like what is reality? So these are old CS publications that I found, but Christian Science teaches that the real man has a spiritual personality, which is a reflection of the one infinite person, God. This good and perfect personality is the direct opposite of the human sense of personality. How do you deal with that? After one commences the study of Christian Science, a very radical change takes place regarding his viewpoint of his personality. As one progresses in this study, he realizes rich rewards of health and freedom by understanding that his true personality is spiritual, not material. Again, it's incredibly disorienting.
Yes.
And in many respects, incredibly damning of an individual's ability to be able to grow. Science and health. Metaphysics resolves things into thoughts and exchanges the objects of sense for the ideas of the soul. All your sensory perceptions are wrong. Personality is not the individuality of a man. A wicked man may have an attractive personality. Yeah, it really is an oxymoron. Or this. This chart seeks to identify the issues, the scientific statement of being, but just considering one thing, personality itself. So you've got on the left-hand side here, the Christian Science worldview. Reality, quote unquote, is perfection, because God is perfect. So that is what reality actually is in a Christian Science worldview. The external worldview, this external is imposed upon you. It defines reality. There's no recognition within that of unique personality. There's no identity is a metaphysical concept. What is that? And true personality is perfect because God is perfect and you are the image of God. So you have to reflect perfection. That is the real you. Your internal lived experience, however, you have contrary feelings and sensations. People live in denial. This obstructs the developing sense of self that's built on or trying to be built upon belonging, worthiness, and competency. And you're faced with good, bad, binary choice. I either am perfect, which is good, or I'm imperfect, which is bad. And doggone it, I can't get out of the bad category because I'm constantly struggling with these things. This we would contend is abnormal. This is abnormal. It's a crazy maker. Now, the material world, it is experiential and it is imperfect. We are born into this, all of us. So there is an internal worldview. And what I mean by internal is in the sense that it just is. It's not something that is imposed upon anyone. It's just what we've grown up and experienced and what we make sense out of through our neurobiology, the brain, by categorizing and being able to compartmentalize and create a picture of what the material universe is. So this is a sense of a unique personality when we're dealing with just personality itself. We're all on a journey to be a somebody, either knowingly or unknowingly. And it's how we're hardwired, how we're designed.
So anyone that's been around little kids, and I mean even really very young children, we have great-grandsons, and they're pretty young at this point, but each one of them is unique in their own way. And you can see that from the time they're 2 or 3 months old. They respond to things differently. Their reactions are noticeably different. And as they grow, and even though you treat them the same way, or you try to deal with things in a particular way with them, each one of them is different. And you can't, it's hard to deny when you see that. That's the internal sense of their own person. They don't even know that. They don't understand it at all. They just are being who they are.
So in the material world, the external lived experience is consistent with the experience of a material world. And in regards to personality, there's a sense of, there's a need for relationships, but we struggle. There's a need for affirmation, but we struggle. There's a need for competence, but we struggle. That is normal because we're broken individuals. So in terms of personality, it is something that is more consistent with the material worldview. So the difference between these two is external worldview in Christian Science is imposed. It's something that you are told. It's not something that comes from internally and you just say, oh yeah, that makes sense. Whereas in a material worldview, the worldview itself is internal. You don't even think about it. This is just how I operate in life. In Christian Science, your lived experience is absolutely contrary to this opposed external worldview that you're trying to operate under. But within the material worldview, your lived experience, that's external. You can't deny that. It's real. And it's consistent with that. So hopefully, this is a handout that we've given that you can get through the website, Katie's website. It is something hopefully that can at least give you some template, some ability to be able to see this and to see that you're not operating abnormally. You're operating normally if you're in this material world and you're living as if it really does exist. And particularly in terms of personality here.
Wow. This is so great, Bob and Judy. Can I ask there's a couple of questions that kind of have come up with this. Do you have a sense of like, where did Mary Baker Eddy come up with this? Like why, like psychologically, like what drives this sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at, I mean, you both probably know a whole lot more than we do, but from our limited perspective, this is not a healthy woman from the very start. Her home life was not good. She grew up a sickly child. There was a lot of issues. She had this quote unquote experience of being healed. Who knows whether that was something that was real or unreal? It was her experience, but who knows where that came from?
and it was a time in this country anyway, across the world, I think, where the mind sciences were prevalent. So it was like the in thing to be thinking about how you think and how your brain is in control of everything. So she wasn't unique in that way, but she went a step further and developed her own approach to all of this that really took off, whereas some of the other ones didn't.
Yeah, so
I think she was in the right place at the right time.
I think psychologically she was a very disturbed woman, and it manifested more the older that she got. She definitely had narcissistic tendencies about her if she wasn't a full-blown narcissist. It was all about Mary Baker Eddy. She was the end-all and be-all of the understanding of reality. It was at that time in the American history as well that there were a number of cults that developed that struggled with the brokenness of humanity, and they had different approaches to how to try and deny that. So you have like Jehovah's Witnesses, who essentially denied, whether you agree with this or not, this is their approach, essentially denied that that Christ died upon the cross once for all time for your sins, and that's all that's necessary to make you acceptable to God. So they struggle with the fact that why do I, as a person, continue to feel badly about things that I've done, and I can't get rid of that feeling? There are other groups that came up that were utopian in the 1870s, 1860s, 50s that had the same kind of approach. Mary Baker Eddy took it to a different the way that you can begin to realize that you are really a good person to begin with and you don't have any problems is just denying reality here at this point. You really are a perfect person and you just need to get out of your mortal mind so that you can see things properly. And then you'll be okay. But it doesn't work. None of it works. So it was part of a time in which it came out of. But then also Mary Baker Eddy was a very sick lady in our perspective.
Yeah, one of the questions is how do you reconcile the idea of person versus personality? And I think that's what you're just speaking there. Like she separates those, the person from the personality. Exactly. And that just comes from that time period.
Good point. Yeah, that's an excellent point. Excellent point. Because that is it. I mean, does person have personality? Does personality have person?
Yeah,
right.
I
mean, you can't disconnect. Right. Yeah. And it seems another question came in that says my mother is playing mind games with me. I mean, I just wonder with this worldview, does that kind of lead into, kind of that, the possibility of being manipulated?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
In the name of Christian Science, another person shared a story. Yeah, like they're if this is, I mean, it's a destructive worldview, but then it can also, there can be a whole nother layer of people using it in a destructive way.
Absolutely. Realistically, individuals who have grown up in any cult, but Christian Science in particular, but any cult, if you get to your 40s, 50s, and 60s, and for you to step outside that and say, this was wrong, there is a huge investment that you've already made, decades-wise, that you have to admit was all wrong, and that you impacted your children because of this, and that the decisions you've made about other aspects of your life were all influenced negatively by this. Most people can't do that and won't do that.
Yeah. There, another question, which I think you're probably going to get to, but what kind of therapies and self-care can help us access and tap into our sense of authentic personality and identity?
Yeah, you're right. We are going to get to that, at least in a cursory way. I mean, this is all part of the support groups that we've been having the privilege of being a part of with you folks. It's finding the right therapist. It's finding things that are helpful that you can read.
Yeah, sadly, there's no quick fix. We've had people that didn't persevere and have never done well. In other words, They wanted a quick fix. The ones that persevered, it's the most difficult in the beginning, because recognizing what really is happening in your life is the most important thing. And once you hold on to that, and you've got a support system around you, and you may not have one right now, but we'll help you to sort through what that could look like. But the reality is it takes time, and you have to be able to give yourself permission to struggle a little bit.
Yeah.
That it's okay. In my estimation, nobody's perfect on this earth. I mean, I don't even know how you define perfection, what that would look like. But the point being is that you have to give yourself a break. And self-care is huge. So we'll get into that a little bit.
And part of it is those four assumptions that we make, the critical issues. One, there's nothing wrong with you.
That's right, exactly.
Why would you not feel and operate the way that you do?
That's right.
Having been raised in Christian Science, that's logical. That makes sense.
Yeah, it is.
And then secondly, you can't change what you don't understand. So part of the recovery too is having a template that makes sense out of this for you. You go to the doctor. You've heard me use this illustration, some of you in the past, but you've got some very grievous symptoms physically. And so you go to a doctor, if you are able to get up and do that, but you go to a doctor, and you go from doctor to doctor to doctor, and nobody's able to define what it is. But then you go to some person and they go, oh yeah, I know what this is. It's this. Now, in defining it as XYZ, that doesn't cure you. You still struggle, but you have a sense now that, okay, now I understand what's happening, and I can make choices in regards to what I want to do. You can't even begin to do that if you don't have a template that makes sense out of, why do I feel the way that I do? Why do I struggle in this situation? Why do I make the decisions that I do? You can't even begin to build on that kind of no foundation or cracked foundation or faulty foundation.
So, and the other thing we say too is that you came out of a spiritual system, a situation. That was the whole of your life. That's what defined you, was that spiritual system. And now that you've left, that's a huge void for some of you, and because there's nothing to replace it. Now, I'm not telling you what to replace it with or anything like that. Whether you have a new system in your life that's working for you or not doesn't make any difference. You still have to unravel that other system so that you understand why it's not right. What it's not Christian and it's not science.
Yeah.
And neither one of those words fitted appropriately. She pulled that out of a hat and made it work. And so I think that to understand why that's true doesn't mean you have to be a Christian. It doesn't mean you have to be a scientist. It means you have to be aware of why it isn't either one of those two things. And then you make your own choices. You go on your own journey as far as that's concerned. So
it is important to kind of summarize what Judy was saying. To every group, 30 years of working in this field, every group we've ever worked with that is Bible-based or comes out of some kind of religious system, as a former member, you have to dismantle that religious worldview.
That's right.
That perpetrated, that infused, that energized all of the abuse that you now recognize as having happened to you. You cannot move forward without doing that. You can't pretend that 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years of your life didn't exist. You've got to be able to deal with that as well. From our experience, that is the most difficult thing for any former member to deal with, because I just want to throw the whole thing out. I don't want to start opening up Pandora's box. I don't know what's going to come out of there. But having said that, it's that journey through that where you're not told what to believe.
Right.
Nothing's imposed on you, but you do the painful work of working through, okay, what is good in Christian Science that I want to hold on to? Because not everything was bad. And what do I need to let go of? Because that is really where the rubber meets the road in this context. So doing that eventually at some point is going to allow you to really recover in ways that you never could if you only deal with the psychological. Now, that's our opinion. And again, we're not here to tell you what to believe by any means. That's your journey. But having said that, if this is not part of it, we can tell you from every single group we've ever worked with, you've got to be able to deal with that at some point. But the timing's got to be right too.
Right.
So being good to yourself in this and realizing I can only deal with so much, that is okay.
Yep, absolutely.
So this next image here, this is something I ripped off of the FFCS site because I thought it was so brilliant. Reading these books is empowering. This is about healing. But it also feels like the floor is falling out from under me. I'm getting to the point where I'm uninstalling programming that goes back so far, I don't know what I'm supposed to replace it with or what is left of me if I expunge it.
That's perfect. That's perfectly stated.
Perfect.
Exactly what people go through.
Yes. Particularly with Christian Science, where now I'm not only dealing with who am I, but what am I?
That's right.
Does the universe, it's fundamental issues of what's called metaphysics or epistemology. How do I know and what do I know and what is real? So, becoming a person, understanding your unique personality. Now we start getting positive.
Yeah, this is
we don't want to leave you in pieces on the floor. But this is the good stuff now. The hope, the promise that is before you. Now, in doing this, we're talking about we're going to start exploring what we call different personality assessments. Little assessments, analyses that can help you to begin to understand your own uniqueness. Human beings are human beings. We have personalities. They are not all the same. We all have a unique personality makeup. So there are many assessments that are out there.
There's a million of them.
There's so many of them. We're going to talk about one in particular that we have found very helpful, but we want to show you one that I don't know whether this has been utilized very often, but it would be something that wouldn't surprise me. It is the Toothpaste personality test. So you've got 4 tubes of toothpaste. You've got the one on the left, which here the individual squeezes it in the middle. They are impulsive, they just squeeze it anywhere. This individual is the life of the party. That's their personality type, outgoing. Then you've got the next one, which is the one who is prone to depression. This individual is very systematic and dedicated to making sure they get every last smidgen of that toothpaste out of the tube. Then you've got, next to that, the stubborn individual who actually is slow-witted, and they just grab that toothpaste tube at the top and they just start mangling it, squeezing things off. Then you've got the antisocial personality type. This is a person who never even opens it up, and they're the ones you're going to identify because they have bad breath. Now, we would suggest something that is probably a little bit more applicable and more personality affirming. It's called the Myers-Briggs type indicator. Those of you who have been involved in our last support group have heard us talk about this. Some of you might have heard of it before, taken it in a job or somewhere else. It is one of the many personality assessments, but in our estimation, it's the most comprehensive. And it takes the self-esteem triangle that we were looking at, that's one of the handouts as well for you, and it builds upon it a focused personality paradigm. It provides a foundation for an internal sense of self versus an external construct, something that's imposed upon you, which is what CS does. And it gives you a baseline to further build upon. It gives you goals. It gives you understanding. So in conjunction with the self-esteem triangle as the foundation, it's a very powerful tool. Here is a little video.
Say hello to Jill and Bill. They work together, but couldn't be any more different. See how they unwind after a long day. How they take in and express information, like giving directions.
Take Pine Street 0.6 miles, turn right on Chestnut Avenue, go 5 blocks north, It's the blue house on the left, number 1943. Here, let me write it down.
Go that way until you see the Stop and Shop, and then walk toward the ocean. You can't miss it.
How they make important decisions. How they organize things like vacation plans. How they sometimes don't get along. But why is this? Perhaps the Myers-Briggs personality framework can provide answers. The Myers-Briggs Type Indicator Assessment is an effective way to assess your innate personality type preferences. Knowing your preferences can better equip you in making decisions, communicating with others, and so much more. For example, some people gain energy by interacting with others, while some recharge through quiet reflection alone. Some people take a detail-oriented approach to information, while others are drawn to the big picture. Some folks take an analytical approach to decision-making, while others focus on how their decisions will impact others. And some people prefer to make and stick to plans, while others take a less structured approach, keeping their options open. All you have to do is take a brief assessment to identify your preferences and determine your 4-letter personality type. Rest assured, it is not a test. There's no such thing as a right or wrong type, and it can't predict the future. But the Myers-Briggs assessment can provide you with a better understanding of yourself and those around you, at work, at home, and anywhere else you may go in life. It's never a bad time to work on your personal development, so get started today with the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator Assessment.
Okay, this is just a basic intro to the Myers-Briggs. And it's something that can have a huge impact. We've used it for a long time. Here's a little cartoon. This is somebody outside of CS who is saying to you here, you're a square peg trying to fit into a round hole. You don't fit. Whereas you, being stuck in Christian Science, no, I'm a square peg trying to get out of a round hole, and I'm friggin' stuck. That is often the problem for multi-generational CSers. So the benefits, we've used this, as Judy and I, as I was about to say, we've used this for 30 years. We've both been trained in it. I have found it to be the most effective device that we have ever been able to come across that is positive, that helps an individual begin to understand who they are.
And out of everybody that we've ever worked with, we've used this particular profile, and without exception, it's the one thing that everybody always comes back to. Even 10, 20 years later, they talk about their personality profile and how it's helped them interact with other people, to understand their own selves better. It's just, as Bob said, a very powerful, it's only a tool, it's not absolute, but it's incredibly beneficial.
And you can't flunk it.
No
So
flunk,
this is something
no
that
bad
you fail.
answer. Right,
That's right. There's no perfection on this.
Nothing at
It's
all.
just who you are. So it helps you to know yourself better, why you think the way you do, why you feel the way you do, why you act the way that you do, make your decisions. It is helpful to give better relationships, marriage, church, work, etc., jobs, whatever along these lines. Helps you to understand others better.
That's huge.
If you're married, your spouse, your kids, co-workers, your next door neighbor that's hard to get along with. Helps you to have better boundaries, because you can't have good boundaries if you don't understand who you are. It helps with spiritual maturity, growing in that arena. And it gives you a baseline for your own self-worth. So some general considerations. It's the most widely used personality inventory in the world. It has validity and reliability norms that are off the charts. It is very reliable in that and valid. It has been translated into at least 14 different languages and across cultures. Now that's extremely relevant because it is something that if it is universal to human beings, then it's got to be something that can transcend cultural overlays, ethnic groups, those kinds of things, and it does. It is based upon 4 what are called dichotomies, either or choices, not a continuum where you go from one to the other, from 0 to 100. This is either or, these 4 dichotomies. And let's give you a brief overview of this. Some of the assumptions: people are born with the raw material of their personality. This is nature versus nurture. Now, nurture, obviously, what you grew up in is going to modify and impact, for good or for ill, what you are born with. But it's nature, not nurture. We all have preferences, things that we prefer to do, ways that we prefer to go about life. We judge others based upon our preferences. This makes sense to me. Why doesn't it make sense to you? Why can't you do it like this? Isn't this logical? Balance is developed by your by developing your less preferred preferences. So if you're right-handed, if you can learn to develop your left-handedness, that's helpful in life. And then we need to pool our strengths with others rather than seeing other people's approaches as being something that's negative and obviously something deviant in them because they don't do it like we do. So these four dichotomies, these either or, there's the first set deals with how we are energized, and this is either extroversion or introversion. Now we'll look at these a little bit more here, and we're going to have to go through this quickly. But then there's also from extroversion, introversion, that's how we interface with the world. Then you've got how we gather information. We either gather information as sensing types. What that means is that we like detail, or we're intuitives. We just want to see the big picture. I don't care about all the detail. Then we make decisions with that information that we've gathered, and we do that either by thinking. In other words, it's logical, what's logical, what makes sense, or feeling. Now, it's not feeling in the sense of being emotional. It's feeling in the sense that how I value other people. I care about how my decisions impact Mrs. McGillicuddy down the street. Then the judgment and perceiving. This is not judgment in the sense of being judgmental. This just means that the individual prefers structure. I like everything in its place and every place with its thing. Perceiving is keeping my options open. I don't want to have to make decisions that I don't need to make right now. I can wait and see how things develop. So that's how we approach life itself, how I want my world ordered. So the 8 Myers-Briggs preferences. Okay, now this is extroversion, introversion, sensing, intuition, thinking, feeling, structured, unstructured, or judging versus perceiving. We have here a list of vocabulary words that are commonly associated with each, and by examining the effects of these preferences in your work situations or by looking at how the preferences affect your communication, that can give you an idea as to what and how you are probably wired by nature. Okay, so here they are. So the energizing, again, this is where do I draw my energy from? Extroversion versus introversion. Extroverts are external.
They like being around a lot of other people.
They like other people.
See, it says it down there.
Yep. They tend to blurt things out. The old adage, loose lips sink ships, was not written for an introvert. That's an extrovert. Extroverts say, "Oops, I shouldn't have said that." They like being involved with other people. They like interaction with other people. They do, then they think, then they do. That's their approach generally. I do something, then I think about it, then I do it again. There. And they do their best thinking when they're doing, when they're talking out loud. Extroverts' thinking clears up in that respect. The introvert versus introverted part, they're more internal. They draw their energy from the inside. Too much people contact drains the introvert's batteries.
Doesn't mean they don't like people. They just can't be on all the time. They need downtime.
Need downtime to recharge my batteries.
Right. And that's not a bad thing.
They have a tendency to keep things internal. There's a lot of depth to them. This is still waters run deep. They like to work with ideas. They think first, then they will talk, then they will think. So they need time to process.
That's right.
There's so much more that we could go into.
Gosh,
We're just
yeah.
flying
When
through this.
we do this with the people at Meadowhaven, our facility that we've had, this would take us months to go through because we do it slowly and meticulously so that they understand.
Then
And this,
attending, this is,
can
yeah,
can
absolutely.
that question came in, which is just kind of interesting because yes, I mean, like we are, you know, it's part of the idea is just kind of giving a taste of all these
That's
things.
right.
Right, exactly.
This is just
And so just kind of, and you know, once it gets you to want to go deeper into some of these things, that's the idea. But someone wrote in here, you know, in Christian Science, we were told, I was like, oh yes, this is so true. We were told not to label ourselves. In other words, you know, if I thought I was an introvert, I would be robbing myself of the ability to be an extrovert. I would be limiting myself. As a result, I've been afraid of taking personality tests. How can I take a test without feeling like I'm limiting myself to a certain type of personality and closing possibilities for myself?
Well, you know, labeling is not a bad thing as long as it's not a bad label.
as long as it's not inaccurate.
So
Listen, when I first took this test, it's not a test, this thing 35 years ago, I remember saying to Bob, nobody's going to tell me who I am. I'm going to, you know, I'm not going to, yeah. And so, but when I read it after the fact, I was stunned at how accurate it was.
The other thing is, on a larger context, I would label myself as a male, and Judy would label herself as a female. Now, I don't, in that context, feel that I'm missing something or there's something wrong with me. That's a label that just is, and it fits
right now.
You know, so labels are not necessarily a bad thing. It just depends upon
how they used and
how it's used,
that's right.
How that defines your own internal sense of who you are.
Yeah.
So yeah, but again, we apologize for this is like drinking through a fire hose. We know that, and Katie, you can probably put a lot of these slides up if you want on the handouts for people to look at more. But we'll talk somewhat about that as we go forward here. So, you know, individuals either like a lot of detail, the information, the perception part, that is what they gravitate towards. They like their five senses. If it ain't, their approach towards life is if it ain't broken, don't fix it. Don't mess around with it. Intuitives are individuals, on the other hand, who like to just see the larger picture. They tend to be more theoretical. They like a lot of philosophical ideas, possibilities, insights, novelty, something new. They tend to leap around all over the place in terms of their thinking. Then you've got the next dichotomy, which is, okay, now that you've gathered information, how do you make decisions? Well, thinking types, it's logical system, it's objective, practical. They think in terms of justice, what's right, principles, reason, firm but fair. Feeling types make decisions with their heart. They have a value system. I don't want to cause pain to somebody else. It tends to be more subjective. They tend to be more mercy oriented. They want harmony. They want everyone sitting around the campfire singing Kumbaya. They're compassionate, tend to be more compassionate. Now again, it's not either or in the sense that a thinking type doesn't have some of this here. But what it's saying is that you're going to prefer one over the other. It's not that if you're a thinking type, you don't have any feelings, and if you're a feeling type, you don't have any thinking. It's just that you prefer one approach over the other, and left to your own devices, that's what you'll do. Then your orientation in the world.
Can I ask another question there? There's some questions about nature versus nurture.
Yes.
Would you just share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, the whole nature nurture. The Myers-Briggs is based upon the assumption that people are born with the raw material of their personality. You are not a blank slate.
Right. And you can see that at birth. You can see babies that
any parent that's had children
they function differently.
There's no way that I would ever be convinced, just through experience, that they're blank slates when they're born. So that's nature. In the Myers-Briggs, it comes from a Jungian background, Carl Jung. But it's based upon the assumption that people are born with the raw material of the personality. Nurture is the environment that I grow up in, who my parents are, how accessible they are, my schooling, education, the worldview that I've brought up in. Is there violence? Is it a dysfunctional family environment? Is it a healthy family environment? All of these things are part of nurture that impact
The
nature,
Yeah.
but they cannot change nature.
You can't make an apple into an orange, is what it is. You can make it look like one, but it's not going to be an orange. It's going to always be an apple. But the other thing is that, as Bob said earlier too, well, wait a minute, back up. If everybody was born a blank slate and you were raised in the same family with the same parents, then all kids would behave the same way, and they don't. So
And yeah, so that's nature.
Yeah.
Nurture can force
It could be good or bad.
It can
Yeah.
force conformity.
That's right.
And in some ways, you want to have some environmentally enforced conformity. I don't want my kids to be liars, cheats, stealers,
Yeah.
molesters of others, things of that sort. So I'm going to
Yeah.
enforce some conformity there, or try to, that hopefully they'll internalize. But having said that, you don't want to reinforce a conformity that is negative.
Right.
That's all nurture that messes with the nature.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so someone asked, like if once you leave, like they typed one way when they were in Christian Science and then it kind of changed when they left. Is that something does that seem plausible that
Yeah,
your
what they took
personality
the
might
Myers-Briggs
change?
when they were in Christian Science and then when they left?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, because you're going to answer it as a Christian Scientist while you're in it, and then you're going to answer it as a former member at that point. If you see, in taking the Myers-Briggs, one of the things that we always emphasize with the person that we give it to, and we've done it thousands and thousands of times, is you want to answer this as if it was a bright sunny day outside, there were no stressors, everyone loved you, you loved everybody, and it was a wonderful life that you had. So you're answering it if left to your own devices and there's nothing impinging on you, not my work, not my family situation, not the stressors that I feel or any of that. How would you prefer to go about answering these particular questions?
And this is why it's hard, because people that come out of situations where they've been controlled don't understand who they really are and don't know how to answer the questions except for what they've been taught. So that's why we would take such a long time going over this with people, so that they would have the freedom, feel safe doing it without anything impinging upon them. And it took time.
And we adapted to, we've really adapted it to work with former members of destructive environments.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you can go online and take this. I can tell you it's not going to be very accurate because the online one just doesn't work well. But having said that, we've taken it and just really adapted it to fit individuals that have come out of destructive groups so that it begins to give them a baseline.
That's
So
great.
I think what we're going to need to do here is, Katie, if you can put up on as handouts the frequently answered questions. I'll just blast through these. One is,
Sure.
Is everyone of the same type of life?
No.
There's variations.
Your environment influences you, and it's going to change, and you're going to function
Being male or
a
female
little bit
makes a
differently. But in
difference.
general, they will lean in the same directions.
How do you discover your true type? Well, you start with what you're sure about. So you can read that. Doesn't personality type fence you in? This was Judy. Nobody's going to fence me in.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't. It sets you free to recognize
That's
your
right.
own natural bent and to trust your own potential for growth and excellence. Can you change your personality type? No, it doesn't change. Although it may seem to focus, as one focuses on developing different preferences at different stages of life. So behaviors can change, of course, but their root remains the same.
And traumatized people sometimes function out of type.
Yeah,
for a
usually
while.
out of type.
For a while, until they recognize what's going on.
So we want to end with a couple of things here. One is the true legacy of Christian Science is bondage. And this is just a very short list. No sense of a unique personal story, disconnection, intimacy issues with others, loss of control, inability to trust others, never feeling or being good enough, struggle with physical reality, fear of doctors, etc., etc., etc. But the benefits of pursuing recovery: reduce the physiological symptoms of the trauma within manageable limits for you. Make sense out of them. Develop the ability to tolerate feelings that are associated with the traumatic memories, the bad memories that you've got. Gain control over these past painful memories, because trauma robs you of control. Understand traumatic involvement in Christian Science as a coherent story that can be linked with feeling and made sense of. Begin to experience a healthy sense of your own self-esteem. Reconnect or manage significant relationships when it's possible and it's healthy to do so. Reconstruct a spiritual system of meaning and belief that contains one's traumatic past in Christian Science. These are all the benefits of pursuing something that is going to help you to recover. It's painful. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But the benefits far outweigh staying in this. And we can tell you, the devil you know is not better than the devil you don't. So resources. Join a support group. Very important. It validates your experiences. You don't feel so alone. It gives you resources to draw upon, ways to think about things. Learn more about the Myers-Briggs type indicator. Perhaps at some point we can have a support group or a webinar that deals only with that, and to have people utilize it and learn how to build that into their lives. The FFCS conference, July 30th to August 1st. This is a conference that comes out of a Christian worldview, and it is very powerful. I can tell you, we had the privilege of being involved with this a couple of years back. And again, one of the things that is very, very important is being able at least to begin to look at and address the whole spiritual aspect of Christian Science that fueled all of the pain that you struggle with now. From our experience, and it's anecdotal, but from our experience, you cannot move on without at least working through that in a way that is healthy for you. There's an organization called the International Occult Studies Association. They have a lot of resources. You can go online and find them. They offer conferences. They offer a second-generation, multi-generation weekend workshop in Connecticut every year that we've had many former members of destructive groups go to and find tremendous benefit. It's amazing when you come out, you go to one of these things, and there's people that weren't in Christian Science, but they were in a destructive group that did the same thing to them, and you go, oh my goodness, they experienced the same kind of things that I'm struggling with. That's validating, it's helpful. And then there's a lot of websites on recovery that you can look at. We would encourage you to stay away from crazy websites that get into all kind of weirdness, but ones that have kind of an established track record of helping individuals really recover. And you can ask us, we'll be happy to help you. So that is it, folks. I apologize that we didn't get through more of this, but perhaps that can be up online.
Oh, this is great. Oh, Bob and Judy, thank you so much. You know, this is just a taste of what is, you know, possible. So, and just helpful to have ideas for next steps. And, you know, I just really encourage you all who are participating, who are watching this, you know, to reach out. We'd love to talk with you. We really would hear more about your story, get you connected. We have a couple books that we love to offer. The FFCS sends out books for free if you're interested in reading Perfect Peril, that really goes into mind control, or Lauren Hunter's book, Leaving Christian Science, which just tells different stories of people leaving and coming to faith in Jesus. We have, there's several just really great Facebook groups. The Ex-Christian Scientist has one, and the FFCS hosts one from a Christian perspective. And so these are just great ways to get involved, because you're not alone in these struggles, and we'd love for you to walk with us. We also have a variety of events. Bob and Judy are going to be, they mentioned the conference. This conference this summer is unique in that we are going to be partnering with Get Wise. And so it'll be safe for both Christian and secular participants to just think about faith. We all have to, at some point, go there and think about faith. We'll have tracks on trauma and the differences between Christian Science and biblical Christianity, and then also on, what do you do when you talk with Christian Scientists, kind of Christian Science outreach sort of topics. But it's just a great way. It'll be kind of like this, but also interspersed with conversation. So kind of like small group Zoom conversation. And that's just really powerful to begin to just meet other people that have the same background and be able to just kind of start connecting this to our own lives. And with that too, we do have a Get Wise support group, and Bob and Judy are our guest teachers for one of our groups, and we have several other people leading these groups. And these are kind of like this. Again, this is kind of a taste of what we do in the support group, where we have just really rich teaching, kind of getting a sense of some different topics that are really pertinent, and then having discussion. And so, if this was really helpful, you might consider joining a support group, and we're going to start those up in the fall. So anyway, so thanks so much for being here today, everyone. Just thankful for your questions. You asked such great questions throughout, and would love to keep the conversation going. I'll be sending out an email with just more resources and ways to get a hold of us. We'd love for you to reach out. Thanks again for Heidi for being here today, helping with the Q&A and representing the Ex-Christian Scientist group. I want to thank our supporters who help make this events like these possible, help us to do this work. And thank you to Bob and Judy just for the wealth of information and experience, your stories. It's just such a help. So we're really thankful for you both.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for the privilege. And we'll do anything we can to help you folks.
Absolutely.
Oh, well, thanks so much. Well, thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and be in touch. We hope to talk again soon. Hope you'll join us next time. Bye for now. Bye.